Hey, everybody, it's Becky Rose. Thank you for joining me again on Gorilla HR, the podcast. We are continuing our conversation around workplace culture. When we think about culture at our workplaces, that's really the identity or the brand. So, what the organization is all about. And I'm especially concerned about that from the perspective of employees. How do you treat people? And do you provide the benefits that people need in order to be fully satisfied and say great things about the company that they work for? So, with our series, we're going to keep talking about benefits, specifically related to financial benefits. So, there are a lot of different things that employers provide around retirement and savings. But I think in this day and age, we actually need to be doing a little bit more. For so many people, they are feeling the pressures of inflation. They're really struggling to meet their financial commitments month to month, let alone saving anything for retirement. There are actually a lot of different things that employers can do, several that I know absolutely nothing about. So I'm actually super pumped today because I have invited Aaron Kauffman. He is a financial advisor who specializes in planning, and he is going to help us understand some of the things that are out there that employers can do. So, Aaron, welcome.
Hey, Becky, thank you for having me.
I am so pumped to have you here today. So, one of the things that I see in data over and over again is that people are saying that they are not saving for retirement. And I see a lot of different reasons for that. One being that maybe an employer isn't doing anything to support that. They're not contributing or doing any kind of match, or maybe it's a small employer and they don't think that there's anything that they can do. That, on top of the pressures that people feel like they need all the cash they have because they need to pay their bills, it's really creating this big mess of things where people just they don't know what to do and they don't know what their future is going to look like. So I know that I don't have to know because you're out there to help people. So I'm curious, what are some of the different things that employers can do to help people from a retirement standpoint?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you got a couple of, you obviously have a couple different options, but a lot of it depends on what's most important to the employer, right? I mean, you do have, I would say, probably the three main options for employers are a 401k or 403b if you're a nonprofit, and really what these are tax deferred saving vehicles. Um, the second one is a SEP IRA or a self employed pension IRA. That's more for a smaller company, maybe you're self-employed, just a 1099. And the last one is a simple IRA. And again, those are probably more for smaller companies. It really just depends on which plan would really fit your need. So, I mean, first thing is to really have a deep discussion with, obviously the employer to figure out what would be most important for them.
So is that SEP only if you are doing a retirement for that owner? Does that one apply if you have other employees?
It does apply if you have other employees. However, you're kind of talking about the misconception of costs and things like that. So within SEP IRAs, if you have employees and you personally, the owner, are contributing to your own SEP IRA, you have to match your contribution to your other employees as well too. And for some people, there may be cost conscious that some employers may not want to be matching or contributing as much to their employees. It really just it kind of all depends. But I would say the SEP IRA is really beneficial for sole owners, sole proprietors, sole LLCs. But there are companies that do have SEP IRAs for their other employees as well too. It's just it can get up there in terms of cost when it comes to matching their employees' contributions. So it does really depend on one, the vehicle, two, the size of the company, three, do you have employees? Four, do you want to provide matching to the employees? And so there's a lot of different factors that can go into it. The nice thing about the SEP, and these are, if you are a sole entrepreneur, you can contribute up to 25% of your income into the SEP IRA, or I believe the 2024 limits is 69,500. So you can contribute a significant amount into a SEP IRA if you're a sole employee.
Yeah, I'm so glad that there are people like you. I wish I knew you a couple years ago because when I went out on my own, I thought, well, I know I need to continue saving for retirement and I need to be responsible about it. But I'm so glad that I worked with somebody who was knowledgeable as well, who was like, oh, no, you can contribute, you can have the tax saving, and then you can do that additional 25%. So these are things that I didn't even know existed. So for those people who are thinking about going out on their own and being that sole proprietor, you can still save for retirement. So, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
And outside of just your own individual side of everything, which would be your IRA. I mean, there are contribution limits to even your IRA. You can do a traditional IRA or Roth IRA depending on your income limits. If you're under 50, the max contribution is $7,000. If you're over 50, you can do an extra $1,000. So, some people that is a great tool for, but especially, as business owners, maybe, we have other needs in terms of maybe tax savings, tax liabilities, employees, benefits, things along that line that can be a little bit more lucrative to be able to attract and attain employees as well too.
Yeah. I know one of the hard things is, I would say, around education, because for some of those employers who are saying, I'm willing to have some financial cost involved in providing these plans, then employees don't necessarily know how they work. So maybe they don't contribute. What do you see employers doing to gain participation from their people?
Let's talk more just about the 401k and
Oh,
403b,
yeah, yeah. Good.
because I think that's more where that's going to come into play in that aspect. And so, really, with a 401k and 403b, depending on profit and nonprofit, it's a three
Let
pronged.
me before you go further with that, is there a difference between the 401k and the 403b other than the for-profit or not-for-profit status? Are there differences in how the plans are administered?
For the purpose of what we're talking about, no.
Okay.
But I would say that administrative depends upon how the company sets up the plan. Even within a 401k or 403b, you can have multiple options of how you set up.
Okay.
But in terms of what you're asking, in terms of is there a difference with other than the profit nonprofit? It's a IRS coding, really.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
But in terms of like education, so really those plans are a three-pronged approach. You have the record keeper, which essentially holds all the funds. There are multiple plans out there like John Hancock, American Funds, Principal. Like you Empower. A lot of people know a lot of these plans if you've been involved in a 401k before. Second part of it is a TPA or third party administrator. They do a lot of the back end work with getting people set up with the plan, getting all the information, things along that line. It's a big contact person. And then the third person is a advisor on the plan, and usually that's someone like myself that can be on that plan. And that's where, if that advisor is doing the right thing, they should be holding at least yearly seminars. I prefer quarterly seminars to really inform people, not just on everything within the plan, but also be a resource for the participants in the plan or the company for things along the lines of budgeting. What does a tax deferred vehicle mean? What does that mean for you later in life? All these things that can be a benefit in terms of education, and so that's where someone like me would come into play for that company within that plan.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, it's very scary. They don't really understand how it all works. And so they're setting aside money and just thinking, well, this is money I'm not taking home, and not really understanding how that value can change over time and how it hopefully is going to grow for you.
Yeah.
So when you do, you mentioned, I love the idea of going in quarterly and talking to people because I know throughout my career it was often that once a year somebody came in maybe around open enrollment and it just kind of was like blah. Here's everything about this plan, and it's like hold up, I don't get it. I don't know. I don't understand. So I love the idea of getting in front of people much more often.
And then kind of like you said, the power of compounding interest. I mean, that's something that is huge when it comes to at least savings and retirement savings that people may not understand. At least participants, employees may not understand because no one's ever either one told them, or two, they might not feel like they have the means to have an advisor or anything along those lines, and so they may not know or understand. So I think that's where the education piece really comes into play.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The one people thinking that they don't necessarily, they're not at a level, or they just don't think that that's something that's available to them. Whereas if you have some kind of employer sponsored plan, then you do have someone available to you.
You absolutely do, and that's where I said that every employer sponsored plan has an advisor on record. whether it's on the statement or not. They have an advisor on record that should at least be holding some type of educational seminar. I believe the minimum needs to be yearly, which is probably why you see that around open enrollment time period. I think kind of checks the box, but in my opinion, it should be quarterly.
And well, the whole purpose in this podcast and in this particular series that I'm doing is around culture. So I think if you're an employer that says, I care about my people, I recognize that they bring their whole selves and have all these other financial commitments. By saying, I'm going to bring in an advisor quarterly, at least more than once a year, more than the minimum says, I care about you more than just the minimum.
Someone had once told me, and I think you probably have these stats, Becky, if you haven't really gone through them yet, but I think it costs 5 times as many resources to hire a new employee than it does to retain an existing employee. I mean, if you're an owner of a company, just those resources right there, your time, the money that it takes. I mean, so adding benefits really, and obviously I deal more with the financial benefits, but there's also obviously health benefits, dental. I don't do anything in terms of that aspect, but I think that's just that really stuck out to me, that you want to create a good culture, a good company, to be able to retain, train good employees and reward them, is a huge thing, and I think these are ways that you can see successful companies do this.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So when you look at cost of turnover, and there are different models and different variations for, anywhere from one half to two times, different multipliers. But when I hear an organization say, well, I can't afford to do anything around retirement, I want to say, have you really looked at it? Because maybe you can't afford not to. Because when you look at what you spend in recruiting, and when you look at what you spend in, all those different things of drug tests and background checks and the time that it takes, if you looked at the analysis to say, is this benefit offering and when I'm paying for it enough to retain somebody, then maybe, yeah, you can afford to do it because you'll just spend those dollars later if you have to go back and backfill.
Yeah, I think the stats something like it takes 3 to 8 months to get somebody up to full productivity.
I always say not all turnover is bad turnover, but I also say think about the people that you really want to keep and think about if that person walks out the door, are you going to be crying? As if it's really going to hurt, then you want to do something to make sure that you're holding on to them.
Right, absolutely. Now, I wanted to tell you, or at least talk a little bit more. We've been talking about kind of the employee side of it a little bit,
Yeah.
but also like the employer side. I think you were kind of hitting on this. A big misconception that I see is that employers think that they're maybe not at the point in their business to be able to provide some type of employer-sponsored plan, whether it is that 401k or SEP or Simple. But one of the really nice things about the Secure Act 2.0 that came out in 2023 was they really allowed good tax credits for employers starting company plans in that
Ooh.
sense. And so, depending upon how big your company is, there's, whether it's less than 50 employees or more than 50 employees, there are good tax credits for companies to incentivize to be able to provide that for, or at least new startups for their companies.
Yeah, so there's some benefit to thinking about putting out that benefit that maybe you hadn't thought about before if there's something to kind of sweeten that pot.
Right. Absolutely.
Now you mentioned the Secure 2.0. I've seen some different bits and pieces around that and some of the other changes, auto enrollment, auto escalation, things like that. What are some of the other factors or things that we can expect with Secure 2.0 coming into effect?
When the Secure 2.0 came out, it was a massive document that came out, and I think it's still trying to be implemented correctly. And you'll probably see that over years, time
Gotcha.
in that aspect.
That's my favorite with all the regulations that come out. It's like you have the regulation comes out and then it's up to IRS or Department of Labor, whoever it is, to figure out like what does it look like in practice and what does enforcement look like. So I can imagine with some of these, it's pretty cumbersome task.
And I was gonna say on your end, you probably see a lot, right?
I see lots of questions like, are we supposed to be doing this or not?
Yeah. So, but I think, kind of come to some of the tax credit parts of it. I have a couple examples here, depending upon like if you have less than 50 employees. So, like if a qualified employer had 12 employees and 10 of them make less than $100,000, and let's say about 9 of the 10 participate in their company plan, and they'll contribute $3,000 a year, just on average. but the employer matches 50% of that as well too. So the employer out of their pocket is going to contribute about $1,500 for each of those 9 employees. I think that's sometimes the hiccup is that employers say, I don't know if I can, contribute, almost $15,000, especially when my business may not be in that position yet. But with the new Secure Act 2.0, their contributions that the employer makes is capped at $1,000. So you'll get a $9,000 tax credit on just that year, even though you've contributed 13,500, or you have contributed 13,500 in matching contributions to your employees. So there are good tax implications as well too. That the Secure Act 2.0 has made it a lot better for really to incentivize the employer to create some type of plan for them.
Gotcha. So what I hear there is definitely work with somebody who's knowledgeable to set up this plan so that when you hear the initial outlay or that initial cost, that you also continue the conversation to learn about some of these other credits and incentives that are going to make it more affordable ultimately.
Absolutely. And it kind of comes back to a little bit to understanding about your business, understanding, how many employees you have, what is the goal for your business for what are you trying to do? And so I think whenever you try to find out what's most important to you. I usually say, and this is me, but money is secondary to understanding what's important to people. And it's the same when it comes to your business as well, too.
Love
Right. If
that.
you don't understand what is important to you as a business owner, and also I can say from the business owner to their employees as well, too, you're not going to be very successful and you're going to be making recommendations that don't have any basis for them.
Yeah. I spent a lot of money in therapy and I should have just come to you to understand that what's important and how to define success is not just financial. So I wish we'd had this conversation like 10 years ago. But yeah, but joking aside, I do think that that is such a great call out that you have to understand what is important. And that's going to drive some of your other decisions for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I kinda laugh. So I don't have kids, but I have nieces and they're now 19 and 22. But when they were little, my brother would put their allowance, let's say it was $1 on the fridge, and he told them, "If you can leave that dollar here all week, I will add a quarter to it." So he was trying to teach them about, like, interest early on. And I think it worked because we just celebrated the holidays and my nieces were opening some money that they got, and one of them looked at my brother and said, "Can we put it into one of those accounts that, like, where it'll grow, it'll make more because I don't need to spend this right now, and I really want it to become more money," because she's thinking about some future study abroad and taking some trips, and she's like, "I wanna be able to do those things, and this will help me if I can just figure out how to use it to my advantage." So, I think it's funny that she was taking some of those lessons now. I guess she'll save on the therapy piece of it down the road.
Down the road. Yeah. Absolutely.
So when you sit down with an individual, whether it's a business owner or just an individual that you're working with, other than asking them what's important to you, what are the things that you use to help figure out how to advise somebody in their financial planning? What's important to you when it comes to making recommendations?
Yeah, I probably have a unique way of kind of talking to people about it. And usually I don't like to talk about, like I said, I usually don't like to talk about money. I like to try to understand you. I mean, I'll ask questions like, what was your first impression of money? When it's all said and done, what do you want to look back on and feel accomplished about? Like that tells me a lot more just about your principles and your values. And also asking about your principles and values. And I think whenever you understand that, then you can understand holistically from a full picture that people's rich is not necessarily financial. People's rich might be you getting to spend the holidays with your nieces, right? That maybe was important to you, right? And so then from there, you can make recommendations where obviously I do investments, but we can tailor those investments to make sure that we put them into a plan that allows you to reach those goals and figuring out those goals. And so, that plan is not just the S&P 500, right? That plan is not just all stocks or all bonds. I mean, that plan is really tailored and really stress test to make sure that you can accomplish those things that are important to you. And then we can create dollar values for them to make sure that we're on track for success. And that's kind of how I go about whether it's a business owner with their company, whether it's an individual employee, an individual person. That's really kind of how I view how this business should be.
I love that. I know when I started out on my own, just over 2 years ago now, at first, I would have said like, what do I want is I want to start this business and survive and make it, and that was as far as I'd gotten. But now I've had some time to really process that. And so I'm much more intentional. I always tell people that there are 3 things that when I think about work in particular, that I want to do. And for me, that's move the needle on pay equity. So being able to do the work that I do, but also some of the speaking and getting out in front of people to talk about it. I want to be able to go on vacations because I think there's just so much of the world and even in our country, so much to see and do. And I want to be able to experience that. And then I want to be able to retire someday. So it's, how do I blend all of those things together to make it happen? And again, the financial piece is a part of that, but there's so much more to it. So let me ask you this. So when you have you ever like rejected a client? Have you ever had somebody who when you're talking about the things that they want, like you're like, okay, what you're looking for, what your kind of either our moral compass or the values, they really don't align with my philosophy and how we go about this.
Yeah, I have, and it's tough to do because, like you said, Becky, being 2 years into this business, you in the beginning would probably just want to work with anybody. I think the saying is, if you can fog a mirror, I'll work with you. But coming back to kind of your principles and your values, I mean, I usually talk about the 3 A's. I'll talk about my expectations for clients as well too. I mean, they have expectations of me, and that's what I try to find out. But you know, this is going to be a mutual relationship. I have expectations of clients as well too. And the first A is advice. I said you don't have to always take my advice, but I'd hope and appreciate that you would listen to my advice. The second one is assets. I don't have to manage all the assets, but to really determine a good plan for you, I need to know about all the assets. And then the last piece is advocate. And if this has been, if the experience is something that's beneficial, please don't keep me a secret. Please advocate for me as well
Yeah,
too.
I love that.
And, kind of back to your question of have I ever rejected a client? Yeah, I have. If their principles and values don't align with me and how I want to run, my business, then you may not be I may not be a right fit for you, but I will do everything I can to try to help find you the right fit as well too.
One of the things that you mentioned is assets. And this is something I always kind of, I don't know, joke about, laugh about, I don't know. When you're thinking about assets, of course, there's the financial securities part of that, and there's homes and cars. Like, where do you draw the line on what you consider to be an asset? Like, for I'll tell you, for example, like we have a tractor, so we have some property, and so the tractor it's probably worth a couple $1,000, like not anything too crazy. But I'm always wondering, do I count that? Do I can is that part of my net worth or not? How do you know what's an asset or not an asset?
For me, I mean, yeah, technically it's a part of your net worth. Like if you were to pass away and is that considered an asset? Like, yeah, that is technically considered an asset for you. Is it an asset that is going to be used for your net worth currently as you're living? No, I probably wouldn't factor the tractor into it. I mean, technically, yes, it is an asset for you. But the big assets I look at are either one investable assets and then two assets that either go up and down in value. I mean, whether it's mortgages, houses, things along those lines, land. Now, from a business valuation standpoint, yeah, like you're counting all of that under your assets. Whether it's tractor or cars or whatnot. But yeah, I look more when I talk about assets of either investable assets or, coming to net worth, your larger assets.
Okay. That's good. That's helpful for me. Although I guess if I didn't have the other things, then I'd be like, that tractor is pretty damn important. But I feel
It
like
might be
right now, I
important.
don't, it doesn't get as much credit right now.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. Here's my next question for you. So, gosh, for a long time, I made the horrible mistake of living within my means, and I didn't have a credit card. And when I bought my car, I worked really hard to pay it off sooner. And so then, when my husband and I went to buy our last house, we had to put more money down on the house in order for me to be on the mortgage because I was light on credit. I just didn't have a strong financial history. And so, the question is really around like good debt and bad debt. And so, what is good debt and what's bad debt to have?
I grew up in the Dave Ramsey world. And so if you don't know Dave Ramsey, it's about, getting out of debt and building your wealth. And so this is probably a matter of opinion because I sure there are people in my industry that we'll talk about leveraging debt to grow your assets. That's not, again, it all depends on what is important to people. But also, if I want to be helping you along your journey, I have to have some level of comfort in the plan that we have with you too. So, what is good debt? I mean, good debt are investing in assets that go up in value, right? In my opinion, those are investments in the markets, stock market. We know has averaged the S&P 500 has averaged around 10% for the last 30 years. You want to be trying to outpace inflation, which is the silent killer. And we can maybe talk about that or save that for another time. Real estate is good assets in my opinion. Now, you don't want to be taking on, tremendous amounts of debt for secondary properties, in my opinion. But a mortgage is a good debt. A house is a good debt to have because it's going up in value. And the last one I usually talk about is businesses. I mean, those businesses usually, if we're succeeding, are valuations are going up in value. So those are good debts to have, as long as, at least from the business side, you're under control and have a good plan. Bad debts, I mean, is investing into things that are consistently going down in value. As soon as you drive a car off the lot, it's like half the value.
I was totally thinking, I'm never gonna get my Mercedes G-Wagon now.
If we plan for it, you can we can start building a little savings fund for you, and we can get that G
No,
wagon.
it doesn't tie into my 3 big goals, so, fancy cars is not on my list.
Credit card debt, stuff that you're consistently, paying high interest to. That is, I mean, I mean, for me, it's student loan debt. I think you really have to look. It's hard whenever you're 18 and 20 years old to look at what the ROI on a degree is, or are you investing in yourself that is going to go into a career that is, going to produce some type of good income for you.
I know, and that one is so tough because we don't know how the cost of labor and we don't know how careers are gonna change in technology, and I know you and I have talked about this too, that we've both, had second careers, and so, where we set out, if you, asked me if that bachelor's degree in fine art that I have is, really helping me, I don't think I would say it is, but at the same time, I had to have that as a path to then do the other things I've done in grad school and all that. But yeah, I think that's an interesting one to think about is student debt and things like that. And then even back to kind of the concept and thinking about employers, that's one where I know a lot of folks who are coming out or some of the new grads that are going into professional careers are looking to employers to help them with either repaying student loans, looking for ways to even do it just through a payroll deduction. So another financial component that an employer might be able to consider. So I'll ask you one last question. Are there I guess this will be my last, and this will be a big, broad, sweeping question. So, as we look at inflation, which I know you mentioned was the silent killer, and we look at the economy now, what is your just general advice to people who are saying, I am nervous, I don't have enough money, I can't do the things that I want to do? What do you tell them?
Why do you feel that way? Tell me about it. So, I think on a broad scale, when I talk to clients, I do like them to get out of bad consumer debt, like we were just talking about. Because even to be investing, it's hard to, if you got a credit card that is you're paying 21% interest. I mean, you kind of can't make that. It's difficult to make that up in the market. it's so. I mean, I like just talking about, coming up with a plan to get out of debt. Now, I talked about, Dave Ramsey and kind of how it came up in that realm. And he talks about the snowball method is list all your debts, smallest to largest, non-mortgage debts, smallest to largest. And that doesn't matter about the interest rate, just smallest to largest. You want to try to get out of debt as soon as possible. Get current on all your payments and then create a budget. That's a big thing for you because whenever you create a budget and know where every dollar is going, you feel like you got a raise. I mean, I felt like I got a raise whenever I knew where every dollar was going. And so you take your additional cash flow for the rest of the month after your budget, put it on your smallest debt. And then once that's paid off, roll it into the next one and then the next one. And so, I think really getting out of debt and then building wealth. I mean, a saying in my industry is it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And so, we know the stock market tomorrow will go one of two ways, either up or down. right? We know just based off of history that in the long run, the markets have always gone up. And so, the longer that you are in the markets, the more likelihood you have at success of, building wealth in that sense. And so, those are probably the two big things I would kind of say for you. If and talking about the economy and people are, might be scared. I mean, there's always a reason to not invest. No matter what's going on in the world, there will always be a reason to not invest. There's a couple of good pieces out there that have, like, big events that have happened all throughout U.S. history, and what happened in the markets, even after that. And so far, always gone up. We're sitting at all-time highs right now. And so, time in the market is going to be more beneficial in the long run.
So don't look and don't panic on a day-to-day basis. Think about
Yeah,
duration.
don't look at your statement every day.
Aaron, I appreciate you being here. So I'm going to summarize, I think, and the things that you and I have talked about. One, from the individual perspective, whether that's an employee, a business owner, just somebody out there is really thinking about what do you want out of life? And it's not just financial, but then thinking about planning and what do you have to do to get there. From the financial aspect, it's putting together a budget and really using that to get yourself out of debt, then work on building some longer term wealth by investing in things that we think over time will increase in value. I think I
Yeah,
got
pretty spot on right there.
it. So then from my aspect of when I think about the employer, I think that they don't have to know all of these things, but there are things that they can do as a business owner that will be beneficial to them, particularly with some of these new Secure 2.0 tax credits that are going to be beneficial to them as business owners, but also beneficial to helping their own employees throughout all the things that I just mentioned, and in order for them to be able to meet their financial needs and build wealth as well. So definitely a lot of things from both the employee and employer perspective that organizations can do to say, hey, we care about you. We support you as a whole person with a lot of different commitments. So I think that is some awesome advice. And I got all my little personal questions answered as well. So thank you.
Anytime, I'm here for you with anything you need.
Yeah, I think that we definitely are going to have to come back and talk about inflation is the silent killer. So I think stay tuned, listeners, because we are going to come back to that one. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all have a great day.
That's it for this episode of the Gorilla HR Podcast. We hope you found some unconventional wisdom and actionable advice to help you in your own HR journey. Remember, we're all working together to build better workplaces. Want to join in the conversation? Send us your questions, stories, and maybe even your own guerrilla tactics to podcast@gorilla-hr.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your network. Until next time,